I am Kenneth Arnette. I am a rogue scientist. I would like you to know I went rogue long before Sarah Palin, so my credentials are authentic. And the first sign that I'm rogue is that I have rejected PowerPoint. So there you have it. That mass of words beneath my name is what I tell people when they ask me where I work. In fact, it's just me. So I work for myself and I don't make any money. I neglected to include any bio or contact information in my abstract, so if you want to get in touch with me, my email address is at the bottom here, and you can always talk to me during the meeting as well. So I want to talk about the chakras, and I want to first admit that I don't know what chakras are. I also don't know how to operate this mouse pad. So, what are the chakras? According to traditional Indian medicine, the chakras are a number of wheel-like vortices which exist in the surface of the subtle body of living beings. The chakras are said to be force centers or whirls of energy permeating from a point on the physical body the layers of the subtle bodies in an ever-increasing fan-shaped formation. Rotating vortices of subtle matter, they are considered focal points for the reception and transmission of energy. And I've lost my place. There they are. Different belief systems, and this is where it gets complicated quickly, different belief systems posit varying numbers of chakras. In fact, some sources I've read say there are unknown hundreds or thousands of chakras throughout the body. But the best known system, and the one that we semi-recognize in the West, has 7 chakras. And I took this from Wikipedia, the finest of information sources, just to make sure that I had everything accurate. But then, of course, not trusting Wikipedia, I sought a second source, another point of view. A chakra is believed, I like this better when they use the word believed, to be a center of activity that receives, assimilates, expresses life force energy, and I inserted the words chi and prana, Chinese medicine term, Hindu term, that I considered to be roughly equivalent to the idea of life force energy. The word chakra literally translates as wheel or disc and refers to a spinning sphere of bioenergetic activity emanating from the major nerve ganglia branching forward from the spinal column. Generally, 6 of these wheels are described stacked in a column of energy that spans from the base of the spine to the middle. I always lose my place. To the middle of the forehead, thank you. The 7th lying, and this is cool, beyond the physical world. Okay, this is mystical. It is the 6 major chakras that correlate with basic states of consciousness. And this is the author, Judith, who is well known in this field. I want to go back to my first slide for a moment and point out that the reason I have underlined these various terms is I don't understand what these terms mean. I'm a simple-minded kind of guy. I like mystical things, but I need them to be more concrete. And that's what's led me to investigate chakras and try to figure out what they are. And of course, I don't do that in a vacuum. I do that in the context of my own theory of consciousness, which I call the theory of essence. And I apply my theory to these ideas about chakras. So first, let's visualize what they might look like. This is a kind of a standard diagram of chakras. You see the 6 in the body and the crown chakra above the body. This is considered to be, I read in one source, 6 centimeters above the top of your head. So it's actually not in your body, and yet it appears to be of your body. And there are several things that I want to point out on this diagram that may or may not be obvious. The first one is plainly obvious and indicative of something from my point of view, and that is that the chakras, the main chakras, are arranged along the plane of symmetry of the human body in a linear way, roughly equally spaced, and the 7th is above the head, so it's outside of the body. And also, just to note in passing, each chakra has its own color, its own name, its own symbol, and its own function. There are other ways of looking at chakras. I have another diagram here. This is much more complex and has more chakras than 7. But the point is that there's a linear arrangement. It's in the plane of symmetry of the body, and one of the chakras lies outside of the body. This, to me, screams electromagnetism. That is what I get out of just looking at the diagrams. And it just so happens that my theory of essence is able to handle such a situation. At least that's what I'm proposing to you today, and I'll explain that. What are the functions of the chakras? Well, first, the names. The crown chakra is the one that lies outside the body, according to Judith, outside of the physical world, which is an interesting take. The third eye chakra is right in the middle of the forehead. The throat chakra, well, it's named for the anatomy. So the throat chakra is in the throat. The heart chakra is near the heart. Solar plexus chakra, sacral chakra, and what is politely called the base or root chakra, and politely hidden behind the legs in this diagram. It's variously described as being near the genitals, near the rectum, in the, the naughty parts of the body. Their functions, this image is rather hard to read the words for, so I'll read them to you. The crown chakra is the seat of spiritual enlightenment. The third eye chakra is the center of psychic abilities. The throat chakra is the center of truth and creativity. The emotional heart is the heart chakra. Survival issues in the, the sacral? Yes, solar plexus chakra. Inner child issues in the sacral chakra. And our favorite issues, sex, money, and power, in the root chakra. I'd like to point out, just in passing, that this bears some resemblance to other ideas, other ways of believing, in particular Plato's tripartite theory of the soul, where he placed the rational part, and that is the part that's immortal, in the head. The heart was the seat of the spirited part of the soul for Plato, and the root chakra was the seat of the appetitive soul for Plato. And although it's not widely known, Freud stole much of his ideas about the structural theory of the mind from Plato. He just stripped it of any spiritual context. And so this bears some resemblance to Freud's theory and also to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You notice at the top we're being spiritual, and at the bottom we're being very earthly. So there's some connections here across history, I believe. So what is the origin of the chakras? My hypothesis from my theory. And of course I have to tell you what my theory is first before I can make the connections. So I'm going to go through this rather quickly. I'm going to count on you reading this as I more or less summarize it. The theory is, some people would call it dualistic. I have tended to poo-poo that word in recent years. I don't like the word dualism. Of course, there's plenty of people who don't like the word, no matter what word you use. They don't like the idea of dualism. But I am, in classical terms, a dualist. I believe that there are two parts of the human being. One part is obviously the body. We can't deny that that's real. The other part I call the essence, the non-material portion of the human being. And the essence, in my theory, is the seat of consciousness. It's what survives physical death. It contains your thoughts, your memories, your personality. It is you. The body and the essence during life are you, but the part that survives after your death is the essence, and it carries your memory and your consciousness. The essence is not matter, but it is also not non-physical. I hate using double negatives there, but what I'm saying is it is not made of matter, but it has some physical properties. And my way of thinking about this borrows on string theory. String theory proposes that there are open-ended strings that compose matter and closed-loop strings that are not attached to this space-time and don't have to stay in it and are not matter, as it were. And so in principle, a closed-loop string collection or body could overlap an open-ended string collection or body. And so I'm suggesting that the essence is made of closed strings, if we want to use that string theory analogy, just as a way of thinking about it. And that's the reason that it can separate from the body. During physical life, though, the essence and the body co-occupy the same space. They interact via respective electromagnetic fields. We've had some discussion today about whether or not the body generates a human energy field. I believe that it definitely does. There's no question that the body is an electrochemical machine, and so anytime there's electrochemistry going on, there's electric fields involved. I really enjoyed that talk about the torsion balance and how to detect that. This idea that the body has a fluctuating, time-changing electromagnetic field, I carry over to the essence as well, so that both of them can be described as fluctuating EMF generators. That fluctuating EMF from both sides is the source of the interaction. When one field changes, the other field changes in response, back and forth. So that provides two-way communication. That's the way of having mind-body interaction, as it were. See if one other thing to add. If the body dies, so does its field. And so at that point, the field is no longer holding the essence within the body, and the essence is free to leave. And that, in my theory, is what happens when you die. The third point, this interactive process involves fluctuations over time in both of the EMFs. They're both time dependent. The body's EMF certainly fluctuates with time, as the physiology does, and I carry that idea over to the essence field as well. And so these fluctuations mutually influence each other, as I said earlier, and the integrity of the bond between the two entities, the body and the essence, is determined by the degree to which these EMF frequencies match. That is, what kind of constructive or destructive interference we get between the two fields. And that leads me to number 4. This is the chakras are the signature of these electromagnetic interactions. They are akin to the interference pattern you see in a double-slit experiment, using photons or using light waves, the classical or the quantum approach. When the two EMFs are in phase, the bond is strengthened. When they're out of phase, or as they lose phase coherence, the bond is weakened. So when they're out of phase coherence, we can have partial separation. And I think this explains out-of-body experiences, for instance, and some other meditative phenomena that people report. So just to illustrate what I'm talking about, here we have 2 diagrams of EMF going through a double slit, and unfortunately my pointer is red, and so is the diagram I want to use. But I want you to note the similarity. Here is where the fields add constructively. It's bright, then it's dark, where they interact destructively. Bright, dark, bright, dark. Now go back to the diagram I showed you of the chakras. Light, dark, light, dark. If you interpret each chakra as the constructive, additive component of the EMF, then the dark between the chakras would be equivalent to the nodes, or the dark spots, in this diffraction pattern, or this interference pattern, I should say. So it's this correspondence between the diffraction, keep calling it diffraction, as interference pattern, and the chakras as typically depicted that piqued my interest, along with the idea that the 7th chakra is actually outside of the body. That's not an outrageous idea if we're talking about electromagnetic field interference. This is just, should not be highlighted. This is the quantum equivalent, and that just shows that we see the same kind of pattern using photons instead of waves. It's just a side light. What's the origin of my theory? Well, it's the near-death experience. And this is an artist's conception thereof. Although I don't know of any actual report where the dead patient is begging the doctor for a second opinion. But the idea is that the dead patient can observe the body and the room the body is in and the people that are in the room at the time. This is confirmed by studies that interview people post-operatively and find people who have had near-death experiences in operating rooms, and they confirm things that are in the medical records that they couldn't have known unless they visually observed the scene that they were in. So this is, to me, the nugget that makes me believe that the near-death experience is not a hallucination, but an actual physical dissociation between the essence and the physical body. So there are a couple of phenomena within the NDE that are important in understanding where my theory comes from. One I call the electromagnetic energetic aspect, and here are some quotes from NDE experiencers. One described himself as being composed of waves and being charged. This is from Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life, way back in 1975, that kicked off the whole field. Another described himself as being an energy pattern, and a third described himself as being a little ball of energy, which is particularly interesting when you look at some of the work of ghost investigators and they capture on video little balls of energy. A second NDE phenomenon that's relevant here in demonstrating the electromagnetic nature of things is what I call induced recombination. And this occurs in operating rooms when defibrillators are used to resuscitate patients who have expired. You can read these testimonies for yourself. I'll just read the first one. I was up there at the ceiling watching them work on me. When they put the shocks on my chest and my body jumped up, I just fell right back down to my body, just like a dead weight. The next thing I knew, I was in my body again. What does that sound like? 3 minutes. That sounds like electromagnetism being turned on and off like an electromagnet in a car light, for instance. There are a couple of other examples here I'm going to skip over, but the general idea is that the evidence leads us to think electromagnetically. So let's apply this very rapidly to the chakra situation. Here's Coulomb's law expressing the force of big Q on little q, the magnitude being equal to the force of little q on big Q. We see that if you actually did overlap these two things, the forces would go to infinity because R would be 0 and we'd have 1 over 0. So standard physics will not be able to describe the situation that I've outlined. Notice also that there is no mass appearing in Coulomb's law. So that suggests that things that don't have mass could still have charge. And that's basically what's underlying my theory. So I would like you to finally to consider this electric quadrupole and consider the idea that it's oscillating. And I want to point out, let's imagine this pair of charges as being the body, and on the right, this pair of charges being the essence. Imagine them oscillating in such a way that they're always in this anti-parallel configuration. I've done some calculations, rough calculations, that show the anti-parallel configuration is more bound, more strongly connected than the parallel configuration. And so if they oscillate in phase, as it were, they're always in the anti-parallel. If they oscillate such that they are out of phase in their oscillation, we will have a decrease in the energy that is present in the system. So this is my idea of how it works. I can't do literal calculations of the real system that I'm envisioning, but I have been able to do some preliminary calculations that back up to some degree, without doing the real system yet, what I've been claiming. So relevance to energy medicine, my claim is that when the anti-parallel configuration is intact and the frequencies match such that there's always an anti-parallel distribution, there's strong positive coherence and the bond between the essence and the body is strong. When these two things are out of phase, that coherence is weakened, and this leads to ill health as defined in the Chinese medicine system. So my idea is that the healing modalities that are typical in the East, as I list here at the bottom, things like Reiki and healing touch, Tai Chi, acupuncture, and all the other things you can think of, are based on realigning the frequencies so that they match, so that we maximize the positive interaction between the essence and the body fields. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kenny. I think you all know the drill.
Hi. I have a question on the chakras. Did you ever experience chakra like a solid feeling yourself
A solid feeling?
of chakra, like an interference, like a mid, not subtler, but in a intermediate kind of feeling as a, did you feel it physical? Is it physical? Did you feel, or you're calling it as a theory?
I have had subjective experiences that would be explained by the chakra system.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm telling you is this. We have a technique that in 15 seconds, we can show that you can feel the chakra over here in Agna. In 15 seconds, it could be demonstrated, and everybody can feel that. So I wanted to let you know that chakra is a real thing that we are feeling and experiencing. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe that's true, yes.
I have a technical comment for you. There are actually 9 chakras. The 7th chakra that you mentioned is in the body. It is right here on top. 8th chakra is the physical universe, which is outside the body. And 9th chakra is the state of non-duality, which is beyond the universe. And we can explain more about the experiential technique of connecting to all these chakras.
I kind of feel like I've been giving a dualistic explanation of non-dualism. Yeah, and it's weird.
Could you give an explanation of how your theory works with both Eastern and Western experiences of lucid dreaming, work in the dream body?
I could. It might not be worth much.
Yeah, I know it's a tough, I'm having trouble thinking of how it would work. So.
Well, I share your trouble. I have read in various circumstances that during dreams, or during the dream state, we do undergo a partial separation of body and what I call essence. And some people claim that you're completely out of your body while you're dreaming. If
well,
that's
I'll step in, and from what I've read, out-of-body experiences and lucid dreaming experiences are actually two easily, well, not necessarily easily, but people have distinguished between them.
Well, I'm not claiming they're identical. Okay. I mean, the classic out-of-body experience occurs while you're awake. But the dreaming out-of-body experience, if that's what it is something different. I don't claim to understand dreams, so I can let myself off the hook there. But you're asking a very interesting question, and I'm just not educated enough to answer it.
Yuri Kron, do you know about Donna Eden in her book? Yeah, I had experience with Donna Eden. She sees all structure, energetic structure of your body, not only chakras, all meridians and additional chakras, enormous amount of all this stuff. Question is, if electromagnetic field keeps our essence inside of us, then it should be very sophisticated electromagnetic field, and who creates it?
Yes.
And then we are in trouble because electromagnetic pollution, we can leave our body pretty soon.
Well, for all I know, that might be responsible for a large part of the world's ills, since we're bathed in electromagnetic radiation everywhere and we didn't evolve that way. That's about all I can say.
Okay, thank you so much, Kenny.
Thank you.